throughout the years. Before Benny Andersson eventually told the truth about ABBA's separation, fans could only guess. Millions of people used to think he and Frida were the cutest couple. However, their actual situation was anything but ideal when they were alone. Benny reveals the truth about their breakup in an exclusive interview. Were the demands of stardom to blame? When did things finally snap? Come and see the terrible truth that Benny Andersson admitted to. An affair went bad. Annie Fried Frida Lyngstad and Benny Andersson appeared to be the picture of perfection in the 1970s, when ABBA was tearing up the pop music industry. Like Bjorn and Agneta, their bandmates, their love story grew in tandem with their ascent to stardom. Things weren't as ideal as they appeared though, behind the surface of the flashy costumes and popular songs. Difficulty was subtly increasing. They would be torn apart by it. Prior to the formation of ABBA, Benny and Frida initially crossed paths in 1969. During that period, Frida was gaining recognition in Sweden's folk music community. Benny, who was already well known for his band the Hepstars, Sweden's answer to the Beatles, sprang upon her at a music event. She had an air about her. His attention was piqued by the blazing red hair and the powerful voice. The connection was immediate. At long last, tonight is the night that all ABBA fans have been waiting for. Finally, after 35 years apart, the band is back together. There was more to them than meets the eye. They were two idealists with identical aspirations. Meeting Benny felt perfect, Frida told a Swedish magazine in 1975. No one else ever could have comprehended her passion for music like he did. Her brilliance wasn't the only thing that mattered to Benny. Something about Frida was unique. Her autonomy, her unfiltered vitality. No one he had ever collaborated with before was like her. Benny and Frida's romance developed in tandem with ABBA. Benny and Frida were instrumental in honing the score while Bjorn and Agneta had increasing public attention as a couple. Benny was naturally gifted in melody creation, while Frida had a voice that could convey raw emotion with each note. They worked together to create the signature sound that would cement ABBA's legendary status. There was a price to pay for fame, though. The strain became apparent in the mid-1970s, when ABBA began to burst. As a perfectionist, Benny would spend hours upon hours in the studio, fixating on the smallest of details. His methodical approach to composition was at odds with Frida's more emotional and impromptu style. They were once a formidable team, but their inherent differences started to tear them apart. Their battles extended beyond the realm of music. The problem became fame itself. Frida relished the opportunity to mingle with other celebrities, whereas Benny preferred to remain out of the spotlight when he wasn't performing. Observant friends began to notice the strained relationship between them, particularly during ABBA's global tours. Their originality, the glue that held them together, started to wane as well. The relationship's flaws were too obvious to overlook. Benny would stay up late in the studio working on his projects. At the same time, he met Mona Nurklit, a TV worker, during an ABBA special, and rumors began to circulate about their developing relationship. In early 1981, everything started to go apart. Benny eventually came clean to Frida about his love for Mona when he returned home. Her heart sank at the news. Despite their best efforts to maintain an air of professionalism for ABBA, the pain of rejection was too great to bear. Their relationship had ended after 9 years of being together. As he faltered to describe what had gone wrong, Benny's hands trembled in an honest interview with Expressen. "Is it necessary to have that song because it was in the last film? Might we not be able to use this one instead?" We ended up trading a few tunes. Even though he maintained their friendship, others close to them could see the hurt in his words. It was about more than simply losing a relationship for Frida. Everything they had created as a couple, musically and romantically, seemed to be betrayed by this. There was no denying the impact of the split on ABBA. Something had changed, yet they continued to make music. It was a different spark. Now that the band's two defining couples were no longer together, their music began to mirror the anguish they were feeling. Those in the know would perceive songs like "The Winner Takes It All" and "When All Is Said and Done" in a different light. As the world witnessed the disintegration of ABBA's golden pair, few were privy to the anguish they were enduring. Lars Johansson, an Expressen reporter, entered the office that May morning in 1981 unaware that he was about to unearth a story that would alter the perception of the band by fans indefinitely. Held within the Expressen interview. Benny Andersson stood atop a desk, fidgeting anxiously with a pack of cigarettes, in a cramped office of the Swedish tabloid Expressen on May 20, 1981. He lacked the self-assurance that was characteristic of him. The strain of the previous several weeks was evident in his shaky hands and weary expression. He had spent weeks dodging the questions, but he could do nothing to stop them now. Uneasy as he sat there, preparing for the talk he had been dreading, was the man who had formerly controlled stages with ease. He owns up to the fact that he was clueless about how other people handled similar situations. His words were burdened by uncertainty, and his voice was barely above a whisper. He was finally able to speak up about the unpleasant reality as a thin veil of smoke encircled him. In the midst of his grief, the guy who had so deftly composed some of ABBA's most iconic songs now found himself speechless. There was an air of excitement in the newsroom. This interview with the celebrity wasn't like any other. It revealed the most shocking development in the disintegration of ABBA's most renowned pair. The press and fans had been whispering about it for weeks. At last, though, Benny was speaking out. A love story that had unraveled more quickly than anyone had anticipated weighed on his words as he talked. The journalist across the desk listened carefully, oblivious to the fact that his coffee was growing cold. Benny attempted to act casually when the subject of Mona came up, but the tone of his speech was far from lighthearted. While trying to laugh, which felt quite forced, he referred to her as his new wife. As everyone in the room felt the impact of his confession, the awkward stillness descended upon them. The anxiety under his mask was obvious to all, regardless of his efforts to conceal it. When Benny began to discuss ABBA's future, the atmosphere shifted. He briefly let his guard down and spoke honestly, shedding the band's polished image. The difficulties of celebrity, he conceded, were real, and they weren't flawless. He quipped, with a trace of weariness, that he couldn't imagine himself 45 years from now still dancing on stage with a beer belly. Frida interviewed that very week, exuding the same composed confidence that had always been her trademark. Grace was part of her speech. Meeting up with fans is something that doesn't happen very frequently, so yes, I'm really looking forward to that. Keeping resentment and regret at bay. Rather, she came clean about how the split hurt, but that she had found solace in a new relationship with an unnamed Swedish businessman. Her statements revealed both strength and fragility. Love, rather than marriage, became her essential necessity. That remains significant. Regardless of its manifestation, love was still valuable enough to cling on to. ABBA reached a turning point with the Express in story. After all, even the most famous musicians have their share of problems and heartbreaks, as this exposé showed. For the next 15 months, the band continued to release music, but by then, something had changed. Their previously infectious energy was now tainted with a melancholy that not even their most energetic songs could soothe. One of ABBA's shining lights was defined by a story that went unheard by most people, despite the band's phenomenal popularity. This is the story of a war child's unbelievable journey from being an outcast in her own nation to becoming a famous pop singer. As the world rejoiced at the end of World War II in the last months of 1945, a newborn girl was born in a peaceful Norwegian town. Frida would eventually replace her given name, Annie Frid Lyngstad. There was a pall of sadness surrounding her birth rather than joy and welcome. She was born to a mother from Norway and a father from Germany. She was not your average child, but rather a war baby. She was already an outcast in a nation still recovering from the wounds of war due to her family's reputation. Alfred Hasse was a German soldier stationed in Norway during the war who Frida's mother Signe Lyngstad had fallen in love with. An innocent romance quickly turned into an oppressive one. There was a tremendous need to rebuild when the war ended, and the people reacted violently against anyone linked to the enemy. Relationships between Norwegian women and German soldiers were met with open animosity, traitorous accusations, and social exclusion. Those feelings of hate were carried by their children, who were innocent yet unloved. Living in Norway after the war was over was incredibly difficult for Frida and her mother. Frida always thought her father had perished fighting for their country. As a shield against the far more nuanced reality, her relatives gave her this tale. Signe, her mother, made the tragic decision to leave Norway in the hopes of escaping the shame and pain that she had experienced there. She and Frida went into Sweden, where they settled in the small industrial town of Torshälla, driven by hope for a better future. Despite the hardships, Signe was resolute in her mission to support her daughter. Sewing garments during the day and putting Frida to bed at night, she did all in her power to provide a loving home for her daughter. As a young Frida, I found solace in music. It was more than a pastime. Singing helped her feel more at home in a world where she frequently felt alienated. At the tender age of 11, she was already making her way onto little platforms at community gatherings, her voice belying her tender years. Everyone in town took note, but her grandma felt the most pride. It was Frida's grandma who encouraged Frida's musical talent while Cindy toiled away to provide for the family. From her meager savings, Frida was able to purchase her first record player and a handful of cherished vinyl albums. Frida would let herself be swept away by the music as she spun the record, daydreaming about a world beyond the peaceful village of Torshälla. Frida told a Swedish radio interviewer in 1975 that listening to music allowed her to escape. Everything else, she said, disappeared while she sang. Her origins and history were not questioned by anyone. Ultimately, it was the music that counted. The girl had always felt different, but in those rare moments on stage, she found acceptance. The limelight illuminated her story, enabling her voice to transcend her surroundings and deliver a tale of immense significance. At the age of 13, Frida wasn't merely daydreaming about a career in music, she was actively pursuing it. In her early teens, she formed the band Horrifying 4 and played shows anywhere she could. She was performing jazz standards in front of sold-out crowds in Sweden with a big band when she was just 16 years old. People in the know took note of her immediately as she began to sing with a deep, soulful voice. By releasing her debut single in 1967, EMI Records provided her the opportunity to shine independently. She had no idea it was the start of something monumental. As the band ABBA began to gel in the early 1970s, a long-forgotten fact regarding Frida's father came to light. She had been informed that Alfred Haas had passed away, but a German magazine had located him and found that he was still alive and residing in Germany. There was a chance that Frida might encounter him. A reunion was planned for 1977, but it wasn't exactly a touching reunion. Instead, there were long periods of awkward quiet, sideways looks, and unanswered inquiries. Frida was left to deal with feelings she wasn't sure how to handle after that meeting. As Frida reflected on their initial encounter, she compared it to a reunion of two complete strangers after a 30-year separation. They tried to get closer, but there was just too much emotional barrier between them. Finally, here she was, staring at her long-lost father. The birth of ABBA vocalist Annie Fred Lindstad was actually a component of a massive Nazi plot, and her life story is likewise one of a quest for a biological father. Unfortunately, she didn't feel the connection she had anticipated. The girl, whose homeland had turned its back on her because of her heritage, became an international superstar with a legion of devoted followers all across the globe. Frida had triumphed over all odds, rising from the ranks of a war child to that of a pop star. However, stardom threw unexpected curveballs. There was still the unanswered question of whether or not she would find the fulfillment she had sought after leaving her pop star position for a genuine tiara. The burden of the thick crown. It appeared like Frida Lindstad was ready to experience her real-life fairy tale after ABBA disbanded and her marriage to Benny ended. She became a princess the day she wed Prince Heinrich Rousseau-Royce von Plauen in 1992. A frenzy ensued in the Swedish press. A magnificent Swiss castle with a view of the tranquil beauty of Lake Geneva was their new home, and their beloved ABBA singer, who had won the hearts of people everywhere as a pop icon, was now living the high life. Everyone around the globe couldn't stop raving about it. It seemed surreal. Unfortunately, the royal lifestyle wasn't at all what the guests had hoped for. A tangled web of rigid royal etiquette ensnared the once free-spirited woman who glowed on stages in dazzling jumpsuits. She felt a profound disconnect from her previous life as she was expected to conform to centuries-old traditions and decorum in every public appearance and word she spoke. The continual pressure to comply to standards that didn't come naturally to her replaced the freedom she once enjoyed as a pop star, and she began to wonder if this life as a princess was really what she had envisioned. The pattern of aristocratic life was entirely foreign to Frida, as she previously remarked in an interview with a Swiss newspaper in 1993. She felt like she had stepped out of a different universe when she arrived at her new job, which was full of formal dinners, convoluted titles, and never-ending social commitments. The social circle of Prince Heinrich was completely different from Frida's home. She had her glory days in recording studios and arenas, but those days are over. Charity galas, diplomatic receptions, and other formal occasions began to take up her time instead. Despite Heinrich's high status in the royal family, his wife found herself stifled by his rigid demands, which had previously allowed her to express herself freely with ABBA. It was as if she had traveled through space and time, leaving behind the vibrant energy she had experienced while performing on stage. She had to adapt to a more restricted position within the royal family, one that did not permit her to pursue her artistic passions to the same extent. However, Frida was unprepared for the devastating loss that occurred in 1998. Her daughter Annalise Lotta's untimely death in a New York vehicle crash rocked her world. The 30-year-old and wasn't simply her daughter. Frida had always relied on her, and she was her closest confidant, and who had a genuine grasp of the highs and lows of her remarkable life. From a young soldier to a pop star and, finally, a princess, that was Anne's mother's life story. Their grief was magnified by the fact that their bond had been profound and unbreakable. Nothing, not even royal titles or renown, could satisfy Frida's profound feeling of emptiness. Frida was more devastated than anybody could have imagined by Anne's death. She became reclusive, spending much of her time alone at her Swiss home, and escaped the spotlight. She felt detached and irrelevant from the glitzy world that had formerly around her, from attending royal events to her life as a music star. Her royal responsibilities, which had previously consumed her, now appeared insignificant in comparison to the weight of her enormous sorrow. Frida discovered solace in the company of Benny Andersson, someone she never expected to seek solace from. Benny made contact with her despite the animosity they had shared and the difficulties of their history. Living under the intense scrutiny of the public eye was something he knew all too well. In ABBA, Frida found a bond that she lacked in her life as a princess. In those peaceful moments, it was just what she needed, but it couldn't compare to the public adulation or the grandeur of her existence as a princess. By the turn of the millennium, Frida had essentially disappeared from view. The world that formerly adored her now rarely saw her. In solitude, the woman who had triumphed against musical obstacles, married into royalty, and endured rejection during the war had found peace. She remained in her tranquil Swiss retreat, away from the prying eyes of the media and the pressures of the outside world, although she did make rare appearances at ABBA-related events. Even if Frida has retired from public view, ABBA's legacy is still very much alive and well. Envision a world where the enchantment of ABBA might be felt in a manner you never thought possible. Sound and technology enter a new age. The rise and fall of ABBA throughout the years is an incredible story. From their meteoric climb to fame in the 1970s to their enduring impact on popular music and society, the band has left an impressive legacy. Despite the fact that they broke up in 1982, a Swedish band that had a meteoric rise to fame after performing at the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest eventually broke up in 1982. Listeners of all ages have found something special in their music. The band ABBA demonstrated in 2021, however, that it was all about the future. Voyage, ABBA's first studio album in 4 decades, was released that year. Their legion of devoted followers and the whole music industry took notice. The CD was well received and brought back fond memories of ABBA's classic sound. What really set ABBA's comeback apart, though, wasn't the music itself, but rather, the band's delivery of it. With their London residency ABBA Voyage, they pioneered a new kind of musical experience by combining real band performances with their computer avatars. Using motion capture and visual effects, the technology that allowed their avatars to resemble their younger selves took 7 years and $175 million to build. There has never been a concert like this one. Benny, Bjorn, Agnetha, and Frida's avatars are so realistic that you could think they're physically present. To get the most lifelike performance possible, the band spent a month donning motion capture suits. The end product is an innovative program that brilliantly combines the digital and real worlds. With over 1.3 million tickets sold since its May 2022 premiere, ABBA Voyage has become an international phenomenon. Joining ABBA for this next phase has been fans from more than 140 countries, many of whom have traveled thousands of kilometers. The concert has taken many people on an emotional roller coaster, transporting them to a bygone era while reawakening the enchantment of ABBA's timeless songs. An amazing scene was created when the band unexpectedly appeared at the first anniversary in 2023, waving to the crowd while their avatars performed on stage. A purpose-built arena close to London's Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park provided the ideal setting for the performance. Thanks to state-of-the-art technology that didn't mask the genuine feeling of a live performance, the music spoke to everyone. The performance is an unforgettable experience because to the 10-piece live band, amazing visual effects, and a crew of up to 200 individuals. The avatars don't merely sing the classic songs, they give them a new, fascinating spin. The enthusiasm of the crowd and the ambience of the venue create an environment where every performance seems special. There will be a fresh way to honor ABBA's history, and fans of all ages, from those who have been listening to the band for decades to others who are just now hearing it, will be there. Despite ABBA Voyage's phenomenal popularity, the band has stated categorically that they have no plans to perform live. According to reports, they were even offered $1 billion to tour the world, but they declined. Their avatars may not be able to perform outside of the ABBA tour venue, but the experience they offer is nonetheless revolutionizing live music. In your opinion, how did Benny and Frida's relationship change as a result of their fame? Is there anything you would have changed to keep ABBA's original enchantment and their love tale alive? Please subscribe, like, and share for more content like this. Be sure to click on the video that appears next. I promise you, you will appreciate it.